Okay, so I'd like to take a moment and just kind of dedicate this podcast today to Carrie Fisher, who passed away. Obviously, Carrie Fisher was best known as Princess Leia in the Star Wars series, and she was the kind of like the hot chick of a lot of young men growing up, and the source of the masturbation aid for a lot of young men based on the Slave Leia costume posters that they had hanging up in their rooms growing up. So this was the era before the internet, of course. So you either had the Playboys or you had Carrie Fisher and the Slave Leia kind of thing for the more nerdy people. Um, so her passing has been really sad, and of course everyone's been talking about it. And of course she's a huge icon in the world of nerddom. Like, of course, the Star Wars fandom crosses over into video games as well. But hugely, hugely popular and a huge success in her career. There's not really a bad thing to say about her. She was the daughter of Debbie Reynolds. Debbie Reynolds, huge name in Hollywood as well. Just from my own personal childhood, she did the voice of Charlotte in Charlotte's Web and the Spider. So I loved her growing up as well. That was one of my favorite movies from probably when I was 5 or 6 until like 1 or 2 years later. I loved that movie for a short period of time. I was obsessed with it. So I heard her voice pretty much every day for a period of years. It's really sad that the day after Carrie Fisher died, her mother Debbie Reynolds died as well, of what can only be assumed to be a broken heart. The father is still alive. I can't imagine how horrible he feels right now. There's nothing worse than having to bury your daughter and her mother on the same day. That's just terrible. I can't imagine how terrible it must feel. So of course I could go on and talk about how influential Star Wars has been to everyone in the world, but everyone in the world is talking about that. So I would actually like to take a minute and talk about Carrie Fisher's less known work as far as in the world of geekdom, but perhaps what she was actually most recognized for in the world at large was her work with mental illness. So here we go. I'm going to read you a short excerpt from this article here. Fisher struggled with mental illness for much of her life, something she was outspoken about at a time when depression, anxiety, and other diseases were heavily stigmatized. It took Fisher years to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder and even longer for her to accept it, as she told ABC's Diane Sawyer in 2000. I thought they told me I was manic depressive to make me feel better about being a drug addict, she said, one of her first times speaking publicly about living with a disorder. It's what you think if you could just control yourself, you had an indulged childhood, you were a child of privilege. I don't know. That's what I thought. You're just a drug addict. So obviously she was one of kind of the first major people to speak out regarding not just addiction issues, but also mental illness. And she was a huge advocate for this, and she helped a lot of people just by being so forthcoming about it and speaking about it in a way that connected with these people that were also struggling. So one of the things that perhaps was really cool about her is she had kind of a dark sense of humor about it, and she would always kind of joke about her mental illness. I know she was quoted one time as saying, like, I'm paraphrasing this, but something like, it's strange that I was never recognized for my acting, and what I was most recognized for is being fucked up in the head, or something like that is what she said. Oh, here I think is the quote right here. I now get awards all the time for being mentally ill. I'm apparently very good at it and am honored for it regularly. Probably one of the reasons I'm such a shoo-in is that there's no swimsuit portion of the competition. Hey, look, it's better than being bad at being mentally ill, right? How tragic would it be to be the runner-up for Bipolar Woman of the Year? Yeah, so, I mean, obviously this is funny and it helps her this is probably how she copes. I know a lot of people cope with their serious problems through humor, and I know that just speaking about it kind of is a form of therapy as well. Just look at all the major comedians that struggled. Robin Williams, of course, being the most recent suicide. He apparently struggled for most of his life with mental illness, and he suffered in silence, man, and you never would have known. A lot of people think that these comedians are so lighthearted and funny, and some of them really are, but a lot of them have this kind of deep, kind of tearing thing in their soul, and that's why they make the jokes, is to kind of help them cope with that, with their own issues. And I know that Carrie Fisher wasn't a comedian, but she did kind of have this dark humor about it. But at the same time, making these jokes and being lighthearted about it and speaking about it helped a lot of people. And so, great job, Carrie Fisher, speaking about mental illness and being a huge advocate for it and helping people all over the world deal with their problems and using your platform to do something really, really good for other people instead of just using your platform to try to be the most crazy or riding naked on a wrecking ball or whatever. So I'd like to dedicate this podcast to the memory of Carrie Fisher. You will be sorely missed. You were probably one of my father's masturbatory aids growing up. so thank you for all the loads that you helped him expunge from his penis, and thank you for being a part of one of my favorite series of movies.